record on. All right, now we're officially getting going.
All right.
That first thing was not real. All right. All right, hello and welcome everybody. We haven't introduced ourselves. I think we know some people here. I'm Meg Reed. I'm the director of Hub City Press here in Spartanburg, South Carolina.
I am Kay McMullen. I am the managing editor at Hub City.
So we're here to talk to you about self-publishing. And although we are a traditional publisher, meaning we offer advances and give royalties and do that whole process, both Kate and I are experienced book designers, and we also do production, help people with making their books. So we have a lot of familiarity with all of the sort of things that you will need to know if you are interested in self-publishing. So we've sort of developed this course as a way of telling you about all the different kinds of publishing out there, and also making sure you can go about it in a safe, accessible, affordable way. And if you're thinking about doing it, you know, in 2022, what the environment looks like, what the ecosystem looks like, and how you can best navigate it. Kate, you want to tell them about Hub City for those who don't know?
Sure. So real quick, we are Hub City Press. We were founded in Spartanburg, South Carolina in 1995. So we've been around for a bit. We've kind of had a few, different iterations as we've kind of grown as a press. We started off doing kind of local interest books, highlighting Spartanburg writers. And since then, we've really grown into, kind of a national publisher of Southern writers. We are focused on spotlighting new and extraordinary voices from the American South. And for us, that's basically like Virginia to Texas. So it's pretty big, what we decide the South is here. We publish fiction, like novels and short stories, poetry and nonfiction. We do 8 to 10 books a year, 6 to 10 books a year, sort of depending on what the schedule looks like. And we're interested in emphasizing the, culture and history of the American South.
And this picture is very outdated, but we haven't taken a group picture because of COVID. Same with this one, but also still relevant. These are some of our authors. So this is just who do we publish. We do, as Kate said, 7 to 10 books a year, and dedicated entirely to spotlighting and championing diverse Southern voices. Usually that means 2 to 3 novels, a short story collection, a book of poetry, or 2. We're usually been doing 2 now, a local interest book, and a single author nonfiction book or anthology. Those are the kinds of books we do. And our books are distributed to the trade by Publishers Group West, which is means we are fully national and international. You can get our books across the world, across the country, at Barnes and Noble, and everywhere. So we have familiarity sort of with all of how all of those systems work, but getting books to the trade, which is the 2 booksellers and the people who sell books. Our books have been featured in the New York Times, NPR, Los Angeles Times. This is actually old too. Oprah Magazine, Wall Street Journal, Entertainment Weekly, The New Yorker. There's a bunch of others, and you can go to our website to see. But suffice to say that our books do get national attention and enter into the national conversation. And they're made here by 3 people sitting in an office in Spartanburg, South Carolina, which is pretty remarkable and different from how the rest of the book industry works. So we wanted to start by talking about the types of publishing in 2022. So like what the ecosystem looks like. I think it's good because you often hear, self-publishing is now referred to as DIY publishing a lot of the time, which is fine. I think that's a good name for it. But the names change and the descriptions change. So we want to be clear on what is self-publishing and how is it different from the other styles of publishing that you can go. And what we always say is that all the publishing models are defined by one simple question, which is who is taking on the risk of publishing your book? Once you start to think about it from that frame, it's very easy to see how the types of publishing are different. Also says 2020 because time stopped in 2020. Kate, you want to go over a few of these? I could pick up
Sure.
too, if you
yeah, I'll cover a couple and then you can jump in if you want. So we're going to cover kind of a few of these today, just in case you're not aware. An advance is in traditional publishing, the money that your publisher pays you for your work. Sometimes it comes in 2 installments, sometimes it comes in 1. These can be, you know, 5-6 figures at a big publisher. These can be, you know, 3 or 4 at a smaller publisher. There are some kind of traditional publishers that do not do an advance based on, you know, kind of budget. University presses have kind of a different structure, but that's what an advance looks like. The big 5 are, Meg, can you do them all?
Big 5 are Penguin Random House, Simon and Schuster, Macmillan, Hachette, and what am I missing? HarperCollins.
HarperCollins. So these are the big 5 New York publishers. They are very large corporations that have many imprints underneath their kind of big umbrella.
We call them New York. We call them New York publishers, but all of them, without an exception, are owned by global German or Swiss or like large multinational corporations. They're just headquartered in New York.
They're headquartered in New York City. That's correct. So these are the big kind of operators in publishing. They publish quite a few of the books that come out of the traditional publishing landscape, literary and commercial. They offer, you know, large advances. They're publishing celebrities and politicians, as well as other writers who are writing literary things or, you know, nonfiction things, all kinds of stuff. Offset, digital printing, and POD are 3 different styles of printing books. We'll probably get into more of this a little bit later because it's pretty relevant to self-publishing, but offset printing is kind of your traditional like plate printing, which is not computerized or digital. We do a lot of our books offset. Most places do. Most kind of bigger traditional publishers do. We also do some digital printing. We do all of our early copies, our advertising copies of books digitally. Some presses that need to do a big second run will do this. So this is like laser, you know, printing, kind of like what you would do at home, but just on a much bigger
very
scale.
Fancy Epson printer, essentially.
Yeah. Instead of like plates and, you know, signatures and those kind of things. And then print on demand is just which is what POD stands for, is a style of digital printing, sort of like a type. And you will see this a lot in smaller presses or in self-publishing. Print on demand essentially just means like when there is demand for the book, it's printed and shipped.
And the difference you can think about these in terms of offset, you have to buy 1,000 or 2,500 minimum and you get a much lower rate. Digital printing, you're buying maybe 30 or 50. And so that's really where self-publishing sort of hangs out usually. But POD is print on demand. It's print every time a book is necessary, which is what Amazon pretty much invented because they control the selling of books so much. They started this kind of system where they bought printers and they said, well, somebody orders the book, we'll just print it, bind it, and ship it to that person. But obviously that is going to be more expensive than the other options. So you can either have a bunch of books in the warehouse, which is good for publishers, or you can just print one as necessary. Publishers will also do this when a book is really old, but still there's some demand for it. They'll do print on demand every single time someone orders it. And then that brings up the distribution channels. So when we talk about how books move through the channels, we're talking about brick and mortar stores. Those are your independent booksellers. Those are your hopefully you all have an indie store in your city or at least nearby that you can get to. That brick and mortar stores also means Barnes and Noble and you know, airport stores and gift shops and things like that. Museums sell a lot of books, gift shops, all sorts of places that sell books in physical copies in stores, and then libraries who buy their books and then rent them to, you know, for free, lend them to people again and again and again. They do purchase those books. And so they are a distribution, you know, way of getting books into the marketplace. And then Amazon, which is obviously like the dominant way that people in our culture get their books now, but not a physical store. They did try a physical store, but didn't work. And then Kate already touched on royalties, so that's good. Print ready, that's just a term that means if you're talking to a designer, it means that your files are high enough quality that they can be printed. If you're posting a thing on Instagram about your book, you don't want print ready because it like won't load and it'll be maybe grainy or because it's so big It's meant for printing. You just need a little web version. But on the other hand, you can't use your little web version to send to a printer because it will come out grainy and not high enough quality. So you do need print ready high res files to send to a printer. And then wholesalers, that is really relevant if you're self-publishing, because you'll hear people talk a lot about getting the book to bookstores. Bookstores buy from wholesalers. And so you need to, if you're interested in your book being in stores, you need it to get to those wholesalers. Otherwise, stores won't be able to stock it. So the key publishing questions, I think, for any publishing you want to do, you have a book, you want to get it out into the world. You need to ask yourself some questions. Will I make money? Does it matter if I make money? And so does my book need to be edited? Do printed books even matter anymore? Maybe I just want an ebook. We hear that a lot from people. The issue of copyright. Do I need to copyright it? Is it mine? What about the Library of Congress? Does the Library of Congress care if I have a book and I made it myself? So those are kind of the questions we get asked again and again. So we're hoping that this will kind of cover most of these issues. I do want to say the issue of copyright one is really easy. You do not need to do anything to copyright your book. This is one of the #1 questions we get in phone calls. People want to mail themselves copies of the book in order to mark it with a post stamp, proof of mailing. You do not need to do that. If you have a copyright page in the front of your book and it says copyright your name and the date, that is your copyright. And that means you have copywritten the material. You don't need to do anything more than that. And there are companies online that will say that they will, you give them money and they will copyright your work. And there's no such thing. There's no patenting for intellectual property. For books. So that's like a really quick, like everybody asks. And so just wanted to get that in. Yeah. The other one, don't worry about it. Little more discussion based, abstract, but copyright, that one's really very simple. Okay, do you have anything to add before I move?
I don't think so. Let's boogie.
Okay. So we have kind of touched on this, but traditional advance based, Kate already went over that. That means that a company is giving you, let's just say $50,000, and they're going to give you a royalty of $2 per book. Let's just say that's about 8 to 10% is average, and most books cost $20. And so that means you would have to sell 25,000 copies before you would make royalties. So that's how that math works. They're just lending you the money. They're giving you money and you're giving them your property, your intellectual property. And so that you can make a book together. So the big five, like Kate said, the advances can be $5,000, $10,000. They can be $100,000. They can be $1 million if you're, the Obamas or that kind of thing, where that publisher is so sure they're going to sell 1 million copies that they can just give out that kind of level of advance. Other traditional, that second one down, that's where we fall. We follow the same mode as those bigger publishers. We just do it on a very small scale because we can't be giving $1 million advances or even $100,000 advances. We're a nonprofit, we're mission-based. And so we do the same method, but we do it scaled down. And then under that, Kate, do you want to talk about small presses? Poetry press?
Sure. So a small press, some of them do kind of follow a traditional publishing model. Some of them are a little bit more freestyle. You will see chapbook publishers in this kind of corner, small, books that might not even be perfect bound, which is glue binding. They might be staple or sewn. Kind of smaller projects. There are a couple in the South, Bull City Press and Durham is one of them. They do, just kind of like a few titles. They're usually quite small. They're not full novels. Some smaller presses do big books, paperback novels and things, but most of these places are not giving advances. They are publishing kind of small, books to a smaller market, essentially. And while some of them do follow like a traditional, publishing schedule, some of them just definitely don't.
And there's definitely
kind of what they do goes,
we are the traditional indie publisher, independent publisher, which means that we do the same thing as the bigger publishers, but we're not corporate owned. And so small press and indie get confused quite often, and that's okay because they function really similarly. But small presses and people who use the term small press, they're often talking about things like chapbooks and like Kate said, things that don't have ISBNs and will be print on demand or digital printed. And it's about getting the work out there and less about selling a million copies. They're not set up to sell a million copies. They wouldn't be able to sell a million copies, although small presses sometimes have hits and then they have to figure it out. So, and then below that, and again, we're talking on the spectrum of who is, again, going back to that first slide, who is taking responsibility for the work. And so at the top end, we have the traditional where you're getting a ton of money and they're doing everything. And then at the other end, you have self-publishing where you're not getting any money, but you are controlling the entire process. Midway through, you have assisted or hybrid, which is the most complicated one to explain. And many of you have heard of hybrid presses. And these are people who you pay as the writer, pay money to. So instead of getting a $2,000 advance, you are paying $2,000 for them to then harness those publishing powers that they have, i.e. getting the book into print and into the marketplace. And they do that part for you and you pay them. And so usually the royalty structure is a lot better because you paid money up front, you took the responsibility for that. So often they'll give 50% royalties, or so you kind of split the difference on the back end. That is a very generous read of hybrid presses. That's like when it's working really, really well. There are also a lot of places that call themselves hybrid that are straight up just going to take your money, and you may never see a product, you may never see, or if you see it, it's not at all what you agreed on. So like just that, I would say assisted and hybrid, there's nothing wrong with it. It's definitely the most dangerous, and especially with the opening up of independent indie DIY like self-publishing options for people, it's less necessary now because that's what we're trying to go through here, is that you have access to the same printers and everything that they have access to. So and then below that, speaking of, is the DIY, which is Ingram Spark, Smashwords, Amazon CreateSpace. There are other ones, but I would say those are the three dominant places that you can. Amazon changes the name of theirs. It's not like CreateSpace anymore, but just Amazon publishing. But Ingram Spark is the other big competitor. And so there are other places that will print your book, but those are the ones that can get it into some distribution networks and get it into stores, and it will be orderable. So those are the three dominant ones in the marketplace right now. And so I just I'll pop this up. We don't have to linger on it, but I wanted to dwell on that hybrid thing for a second. And so they have the same business model as assisted services. The author pays to publish. So She Writes is a really good one, and they have really successful books. Ink Shares, those are places where you'll see those books in your local newspaper reviewed and things like that. They're very good at what they do. The hazards down there at the bottom, avoid companies that use high pressure sales tactics, such as Author Solutions, really bad. Author House, iUniverse, Westbow, Archway, they change their name constantly. But if you feel like you're being pressured into buying something, that is not a good publishing system. And that's something that you should, if you would like to go the hybrid route, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to invest some of your own money in, but you shouldn't feel like you're being hounded or chased or, pressured to do anything. And then this is a full breakdown of what independent publishing means. I feel like most people kind of understand it. You're complete control of the artistic and business decisions. Ingram Spark, printer ready PDF files that cost little or nothing to start, which is really great. And then KDP, Amazon KDP, that gets it to Amazon. So that's like, if you're trying to make the decision between the brands, those are the things that you could be weighing. You are in charge of everything though. As it says here, if you're confident about sales, you may hire a printer, but you are in charge of the print run, the inventory, fulfillment, shipping, everything. So if you're okay with having the books all under your control, DIY publishing offers really kind of amazing ability to control that, but you have to be okay with doing that. And also you have to understand that sometimes bookstores and libraries and places like that don't want to stock self-published books. And so we have some ways at the end that you can kind of make sure that you're successful with self-publishing, because it would be foolhardy for us not to mention that there are tensions between booksellers and self-published authors. And so, okay, how to decide which path is best for your book. We have touched on this already, but what does success look like to you? This means do you just want to get your book out there? Do you want to get your family story bound into pages so that you can distribute it to your family members? Do you want to see it reviewed in newspapers? Do you want to see it in your local bookstores? Are you okay with just printing 50 and then being done with it forever? Or is it something you want to keep in print for a really long time? Kate, you want to talk about resources?
Sure. Going back a little bit to the kind of assisted hybrid thing, and also to, the idea of DIY is that you are controlling all of this stuff. So a lot of it is, do you want to invest your own money into publishing a book, or would you rather go a more traditional route, which can just take a long time? Do you want to, invest either time or money? Sometimes it's both, sometimes it's either or. Do you have connections in literary spheres that can help you do the traditional path, or do you just kind of want to control, like we've been saying, every aspect of the project yourself? This also includes, cover design, how the book looks inside. So those are just a couple of reasons, to go one way or the other.
And other resources that are less tangible. Say you are a doctor and you're writing about like a particular, new study or something that you're working on, or research you've done, and you don't want to go through like peer-reviewed university circles. You just really want to get the information quickly to people because you think that it would be useful for them to have. That resource is your knowledge and your expertise. And you probably know other people in the medical field that would be interested in maybe buying the book, or maybe you could, go to a trade show or something like that. So those are other resources that you have because of your expertise, that would help you get that book out to people. And that also goes into, why do you write? Why are you called to tell the story? Are you looking to make a lot of money? Are you looking to, preserve something that someone else wrote for posterity? There's lots of reasons that people want to get a book out. And those are the questions you really need to ask yourself before you decide on what style of publishing is the best fit for you. And we're going to record this and we can send you this as well. But this is like the one you should screenshot if you're going to screenshot something. This is literally just, people always ask us, where can I find presses? Like this is before you decide to self-publish. These are like the 5 places that it's really good to check out, especially if you have like a bad feeling, or you are looking at the hybrid space and you want to kind of look and say, and I always tell people the best thing you can do is Google the name of the company plus like scam ? And you'll find people yelling about it on the internet. Absolutely. But Jane Friedman has a lot of this is pulled from her evaluation of how presses work. Poets and Writers has a free small press and book prize database if you want to go the prize route and try to win some prize money and get your book published. And then Publishers Marketplace and literary agencies also have resources where you can see all of the presses that are functioning right now. And then the back pages of the books you love. If you love a book, turn to the back page, see who the agent is, see who the publisher is. It has all that information in it. And so that's another way of just kind of isolating who you are interested in. And so again, with the Googling, the scams, there's so many different scams. It's like, I couldn't even go into, we hear from people all the time that have given money and the books have never arrived, or they arrive and they're like cut off. The inside is not readable. So companies that promise to publish you with Amazon, you can access Amazon yourself. That's the entire point of Amazon, is that it's total creator driven. So you don't need to pay anybody for that. Companies that charge you for ISBNs or barcodes, that you can also buy yourself. We buy ISBNs all the time. And it's one company controls them. It's Bowker, Bowker. Have it on a later slide. But you can just buy one. So again, don't pay someone else a weird fee for doing things that you can do yourself. Companies that charge you to copyright your book. Writing awards where you'll be charged to be in an anthology. It's always wonderful to win an award, to be included with a lot of writers, that kind of thing. There's lots of very legitimate places that do that kind of stuff, but you should never have to pay money to be included in the book. And those are just 4 that I hear about often. So there are probably a lot of other ones out there as well. If Kate, you want to go over the query stuff? If this is just thinking about, this is good if you're going to be looking at an agent or looking at a publisher, but even just thinking about your book as you go to putting it together to publish it, here are some things that you can think about.
Sure. So if you're going to query, which is, basically essentially writing a cover letter about your project, if you're going to query a press that's going to give you an advance and publish your book in the traditional format, this is sort of a good template for how to go about that. Essentially, you want to tell the publisher about your book's place in the marketplace. Is it a literary, story that only you can tell? Is it an upmarket story that's super readable, page turny and a little bit different? Is it a memoir about a unique experience you've had, right? So you want to position yourself in the market that you'd like to sell the book in. This is an important thing for publishers because this is the easiest way for them to figure out if it's a good fit for them because they know their market pretty well.
And if you're your own publisher, then you also need to know this.
Yes. It's good. This is good to think about a book generally too, even if you're not going to write a query letter. Knowing that your book is a good package, this is a good way to talk about it to folks in the world generally. So comp titles, those are just comparison titles. We love these as in the traditional publishing landscape because again, it just helps us understand where your book lies in the marketplace. This is usually 2 to 3 books that have been published in the last 3 years. So try to stay as relevant as you can, as fresh as you can. Books that are like your book or that pick up parts of your book. And I think maybe some of you are thinking, no book is like my book, and that's totally okay. We ask for 2 to 3 because sometimes it's true, like you've written something that's super different, but you can kind of smoosh things together. You can use TV shows, you can use movies. If you've got kind of 2 ideas, like if it's the one that we use all the time is, we got a query a long time ago that was like Pat Conroy meets the movie Twister. Which is great. You want to come up with a kind of unique comparison that will tell the publisher kind of what your book is sitting between or next to. You should be able to talk about, I kind of touched on this, but you should be able to talk about why you're the best person to write your book. Maybe it's this unique experience that you've had, or you're in a field in particular that's, that gives you the right to talk about what you're talking about. And you should sort of be able to understand the potential sales channels, markets, and networks that you have access to. Meg was talking about, say, maybe you're in a medical field and you're going to publish a book and take it to trade shows. That's all super relevant information for somebody to know, whether it's a query or if you're going to an independent store asking to consign a book that you've published in a self-publishing space. And then also be thinking, especially for traditional publishing, about established authors who might support your book. When you pick a book up and there's quotes on the back, we call those blurbs. And this is a super important kind of marketing strategy in the traditional publishing space. It's a way to vet you as a writer and to continue to place you in the market, that your book is being sold into, if that makes sense.
It's also, if you know people, if you give them a book, they might put it on their social media in terms of like an author with a little bit of a network. And it's amazing how much writers will say my friend published this, even if it's self-published, I'm just really happy for them and I'm really proud of it, especially if it looks beautiful and it's well designed and everything. So yeah, just be thinking always about those networks that you can access. These are the technical details. These are the words that you'll hear thrown around. This is sort of Kate and I's domain because we're both book designers. Format means, are you publishing your book in paperback or hardback? And obviously paperback, I feel like we all know what these things are, but we don't know the sort of how they're made. Most people, don't know too much about how they're actually put together, but a paperback book is just a block of pages that then is wrapped in a cover and glued, very standard. But a hardback book is actually traditionally and still sewn into a sort of little booklet, and then they wrap it in these hard cardboard pieces, and then they wrap those cardboard pieces in a dust jacket, which, as you can tell from my describing it, is way more complicated, is much more expensive, and the break on hardbacks doesn't go as low as paperbacks. So paperbacks, you can have them made fairly quickly, and hardbacks take a little while to make, and are more expensive, and they're also heavier. And I always want people to think about that. If you're going to be a self-publisher, because like Kate and I are a small team, traditional publishers, so we like lug a lot of books. We have a warehouse near our office, and we're always mailing and going to FedEx and everything. And a box of hardbacks weighs 40 to 45 pounds. So if you're older, if you're maybe not in perfect health for lifting, hardbacks are really heavy. And so if you're going to have 500 of them in your garage or whatever, just be thinking about that from your own as the fulfillment person. Paperbacks are lighter. Trim sizes, you can make a book now any size you want, really, but the most standard are 5.5 by 8.5 and 6 by 9. Those are the two standard book sizes. And then paper stock, you don't have to worry too much about it, but in all self-publishing spaces, they'll offer a cream paper. And I will say, like, an immediate hack is pick the cream. It's a little bit heavier. It makes your book a little thicker, but it looks so much nicer. And when you see a book with white pages, it really makes you immediately think of like a textbook. And people don't think of that because they don't. Cream, white sounds kind of like the same thing, but cream paper is nicer, and it's just like it doesn't cost anymore. It's just like a nice thing that makes your book look better. And then we have a question in the chat about ISBN. ISBN is the number that is assigned to every book in order to track them through. So like if you have an ISBN, I have books back here. If you have an ISBN, it's going to be here on the bottom barcode of the back cover. And if you put that ISBN into Google, if you put that in for one of like a Hub City book, it's going to bring up Amazon, Barnes and Noble, every single place that's for sale, because that is the identifying number that is attached to that book. And it's actually done by format. So if a book is hardback, paperback, audiobook, ebook, it has 4 different ISBNs. It's a 13-digit number, so there are billions of them. And like I said, there's a company named Bowker, Bowker, and they assign your book title to that ISBN. Ingram, if you publish with Ingram, will also do that for you. They have that in their system, which is really nice. And that's just so that when it goes to a bookstore, they can scan it in easily. It's not going to they don't have to manually make a little tag for it or anything. It's just for databasing and for sales.
Yeah, one more thing on ISBNs is that when you buy a barcode, what you do is you plug the ISBN into the barcode site, and then the ISBN becomes your barcode. Most ISBN sites have a barcode. You buy it together. You're buying it's $125 for a single ISBN. They get cheaper as you buy more of them, but one will always cost you $125. If anyone puts it anywhere else, they're marking it up. And then the barcode is usually $10. So you should be only in for your little identifier, $135. And usually they package them together and they just send you a barcode that has your ISBN in it. Yep.
And then another good screen to screenshot is the resources for DIY publishing. These are places that we have worked on with, that we trust, that so we design all of our books at Hub City. Kate and I design. We do occasionally do like a guidebook, that kind of thing, and so we'll send that one out to someone, but all of our books we design in-house. But we often need art and other things from outside designers, because neither of us are artists. We have an employee now who's an illustrator, and so I can't say none of us are artists anymore, but Kate and I, who are doing the book design, are not illustrators or artists. So these are actually places that we go to for people. And so I have 99 Designs, Reedsy, and Fiverr. Reedsy is a marketplace of designers that you can work with directly. And that's similar to 99 Designs. Fiverr, I think everybody's pretty familiar with. It's like very low cost graphic design. And I will say it is very low cost, and for a reason. It looks often a lot more it looks low cost. But the thing is, if you want to do a series, you can go on Fiverr and tell somebody I need 3 books for this trilogy, and they'll design all of them to look the same for $150 or something like that. If that's what you want, you just want to get it done, there's nothing wrong with that. Reedsy and 99 Designs are going to give you more experienced designers who might charge you more, like $500 or $750 for a cover, but it's going to be indistinguishable from a bigger press traditionally published book. So do you want that? Do you want people to know immediately that your book is self-published and that's okay with you? Or do you want it disguised and to blend in with the bigger press books? That's again, thinking about what you want from the process. And then we have the printers, Ingram Spark, Kindle Direct Publishing, Blurb, BookBaby. You guys probably know of other ones. There's ones that do photo books and hardcover books, that kind of stuff for like photos and stuff. And those are not good for book production because they're meant to print like one off for your friends and family. And then Kate is in this world right now because she's designing a cover and looking for photos. But you want to talk about those, the photo sites and photo licensing?
Yeah. So yeah, I was literally doing this yesterday as I was leaving work, but we've got a novel coming out that I'm working on doing a cover for. It's set in the world of high school football. So I've been on specifically Unsplash and Flickr a lot, looking for like football adjacent photos that I can license. Unsplash is free as long as you credit the person who took the photo. And the photos on Unsplash, and Pexels is also like this. They are high quality, very nice photography. You'll find when you go through there a lot of like product photography. All of this is work from people who are taking photos for a living, and the stuff is high res for print for literally no cost except to credit the photographer. And then Flickr, there's kind of like a usage, copyright usage kind of dial you can use. Some people you will need to contact and pay. Some of them are just uses for free. And then pay stock sites, which is kind of, Flickr has both of these things. Shutterstock, iStock, Adobe Stock, if you have an Adobe subscription. Some of the stuff can come from there for free if you're paying for Adobe. If you're designing all of your own stuff, you probably have Adobe already. These are all just like really good, like well-vetted places to go look for specifically photos, but Shutterstock and iStock will have vector images and illustrations that are already done that you can license. So if you're going to try to do your cover by yourself, or you want to send an image to a designer and say, I already picked this, can you put some text on it? Because that can be one of the harder things. Just slapping text on a photo like can look a little too DIY sometimes. If you want somebody to kind of nuance a cover for a photo you've already chosen, these are all really good places to do that. If you want to splurge and spend a little more money to a lot more money, Gallery Stock and Millennial Images, which are the same company, are very high art, really nice things. You're just going to probably spend like $750, $1,000 there, but there's some really nice photos there too. Those are all really good resources to find some stuff that's going to look a little sharper for a little less money than it would cost to have someone illustrate a cover, for instance.
And that's, obviously if you have a photographer friend who will let you use a photo, that's great. If you have a family photo that you want to use, that's really common. Just make sure that you go to the library or to FedEx and get it scanned really, really high, like a big file. Sometimes people will contact me, and because Kate and I both freelance, like I said, and doing book design, sometimes people will contact you and say like, oh, I want to use this family photo. And it's like, the small format photos that they used to have. And it's like very small. And if I pull it to a full cover, a 6x9, it's quite big, it's going to get blurry and grainy. So if you're scanning those images in, especially if you're finding them in like a shoebox and you may not have access to them, make sure you scan them at a really, really high resolution so that they can be usable. But if you don't have a photo that you have access to, you can't just pull a photo off the internet. I'm sure you all know that, like, people own those are their intellectual property. And so you have to make sure that you have licensed the photo, got the permissions to use it. But the reason we talk about Pexels and Unsplash is that we use them as designers because they're such beautiful photos. Like after we're done here, go look on Unsplash and you'll just be shocked at how beautiful the photos are. And they're completely free. So it's like the most amazing gift to, if you're going to hire a designer, you could go on Unsplash and find a couple photos and say, here's what I'm thinking of. Even if they don't end up using those photos, it'll give your designer like an inside look into what you're thinking about how you want the book to look. And then, the costs can be really variable. Like I said, if you want to go on Fiverr, you can get somebody to do it for you. Amazon has some services where you can drop a Word doc into their little service thing and it'll print the interior. It won't look as good. I see a lot of those books in my day-to-day life. The parts of a book, this isn't like a book design course, but we can also talk about it in the questions after. But these are margins, the outside white space, and then this is called the gutter. There's a certain amount of lines on the page that's kind of acceptable. What we find with Amazon books where someone has just dumped the Word file in is that there's usually really big spacing between the lines and there's not a lot of space in the middle. So you have to kind of like crack the book open really far. So you can get away with just using a service like that, but if you can hire a designer, it will look more professional. It'll be more enjoyable for people to read. It'll be a better product overall. So editing costs, that's getting your manuscript in order. Maybe you've been in an MFA program or you've been in writers workshops and you feel like your book is like really ready. So you can skip that, but it is 30 to 50 an hour, 2 to 5 pages per hour. Editors will sometimes do a page rate. Sometimes they'll do an hourly rate. If they give you an hourly rate, ask how many pages they can read an hour, because you need to know if they come back and they're like, oh no, I only read 1 page an hour. That's like, a problem. And then design cost. This is really squishy because people are all over the map with it, but usually $45 to $85 an hour, 6 to 10 pages per hour. Most often it's better to hire somebody based on project cost. And so the cover will cost you somewhere between $300 and $700. And when we hire out designers at Hub City, this is what we pay as well. And then the interior, I'm not sure why the number got locked up, but usually an interior is $1,000 so the interior is the inside pages of the book, $1,000 to $2,000 for a regular length book. So, if you want to put that money into it, it's going to cost you probably $2,000 to get a book that looks like a professional product. And you can, like I said, there sometimes cover interior ebook packages can be cheaper. They'll bundle it together if you use one designer. So, and somebody might charge you $750 for the whole thing. It depends on what lots of people, they're all over the map, but that's what we pay people usually, that and up. So, and then this is, I don't want to open this, but the print cost, this is a really great calculator, and I'm gonna just, when we're chatting, I'll drop it in the chat. So we talk about Ingram Spark a lot because they're the dominant book printer for people. They have a calculator where you plug in the how long your book is, what size you want it, what color paper you want it, and it shows you how much the unit cost will be. Kate and I use this because we're printing books all the time for little orders, old books that we published 25 years ago, that kind of thing. And we're constantly using this little calculator, and it's pretty reliable. It'll say like, oh, if you order 100, it's $2.75 each. If you order 500, it's, $2 each or whatever. So it can help you sort of think about what you're going to be in, how many you want to get. And then I just have, these are all rates from the Editorial Freelancers Union. Kate has gone over some of this. Kate, you want to kind of breeze past the again, what makes a self-published book stand out besides obviously being well produced? That's really important, but here's the other stuff.
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff that I talked about in the kind of query letter area is pretty relevant here. The best thing to do is to kind of take a look at books that are like your book and check out kind of what they have going on and make sure you're just ticking all the same boxes, right? It's nice to have a recent author photo. Most often you can take this with an iPhone. Like,
yeah, you don't need to hire somebody.
Yep. You can look up like selfie tips. You can have someone take it for you. The author photo is like, should cost you no money unless you want to, have a fun photo shoot for yourself. That's fine. You want to do next to that photo an updated bio with where you live, which we get told by our distributors is very important to people who are buying books. Because it's nice to know that there's somebody, especially if you're going to go to your local bookstore and consign books there. It's nice to know that you're a local person that might be of interest to folks. When you're putting together an author website, which is always really helpful. It's always nice to be able to Google your name and see that come up. I love to recommend Squarespace. It's gone up a little bit because of inflation and things, but it's relatively affordable. Wix is free if you want to have the little tag like wix.com at the end. Those are all really good, really easy, user-friendly sites to use. And you're going to want to use all of your same, materials on there, your bio, your author photo, blurbs from any writers who have read the book, an editor who, could give you a blurb. And then your book description and your marketing language should go everywhere all the time next to your book, wherever you can fit it. I'm going to kind of combine this with like a statement about the book. If you want to write a synopsis, the best thing to do is just look at other books. They are pretty tight. They don't offer like plot spoilers, but they offer plot teasers. Really the best thing to do is read a bunch of them in the kind of genre that you're working in. If you're writing like a thriller series, you want to kind of take a look at, how the synopses grow over the trilogy or whatever. But you want to do, you can put your comp titles in the synopsis that you've used for, pitching the book other places.
For fans of blank and blank,
Yep, for fans of Joe Nesbo or whatever. To kind of keep, like I said, continuing to put your book in the marketplace that it should be in, and to signal to readers of that stuff that, oh, this is for me. It could be the stuff that inspired your book. That's probably honestly the best thing to do. And so you want to have all of that on your back cover, or on flaps if you spring for like, they're called French flaps, the paperback flaps that open up. So that's where all of that info goes. But then you can also kind of do the same kind of thing on your author website and keep it co-branded, use colors from your cover. So everything is a nice package and it feels really professional and well thought out. Those are going to be the best ways to get people to click on something, to get people to purchase the book when they find it.
And we've gone over this pretty well. These are just things to be thinking about. Authors that are similar books, stores around you who might host an event. This is really important. If you want bookstores to carry your self-published book, you need to make a relationship with them. We run a bookstore in downtown Spartanburg, which hopefully many of you have been to. And the most important thing for us is if somebody comes in and says, hey, I self-published a book, we're not like, no, we don't want it. But if we've never seen them before, why would we want to stock it? We don't know you, you're a stranger. But when somebody we know comes in and says, I've self-published a book, it's like, oh, we would love to help you because we know you. So like the best thing you can do if you're planning this process is go to your local bookstores, meet people, just like be a face that they recognize. Same with media outlets. If you know people at newspapers, at libraries, there are people that have sold so many books self-published in their communities by just driving them through book clubs, and knowing people at the newspapers and a library, that kind of thing. And then essays and op-eds, like especially if you're writing about politics or any sort of topical stuff, maybe you can pitch an op-ed to your newspaper. Newspapers are not as powerful as they used to be, but they still, even our local Herald Journal runs, opinion pieces and that kind of stuff. So letters to the editor, that kind of thing, where you can say, hey, this is a big issue in the news. I actually have a book about this. Go get it at this bookstore that I have made a relationship with, and they are selling it. And then we're going to end by talking about social media because it's always something people bring up. But I think actually we're going to skip social media and we're going to talk, because this relates to what we were just talking about, which is the most important thing is being a good literary citizen. However your book goes, whatever happens with it, we want you, the best experience you can have is that you got your story out there. It's packaged in a way that you're proud of. You don't have 25,000 sitting in a warehouse somewhere that you don't need. You buy the right amount. And also you connect to people and talk with people and meet people through having this book. So that means finding your literary community, whether that's online or in person. You connect with writers in your city or region. You go to the bookshops and stores that sell books. If you're history, you might want to go to the history museum and talk to them and say, hey, I'm writing a book about this battle. And like, I have a book, they might want to sell it. That is all face-to-face networking that is so important. And it will ingratiate people to want to support you and to support your book. And don't get discouraged if they say, no, we don't sell books, get out of here. That is it's part of it too, because you're your own sales team. And so you have to have a little bit of a thick skin about that. But then cheer on other writers. When you have friends that are self-publishing or publishing traditionally, buy their book, post about it on social media, tag them in, let them know that you're doing this. Then when it comes time when your book is coming out, they will do the same thing for you, because we're like a reciprocal kind of community. That's how we're built as humans. And so it's a really basic thing, but being kind and being supportive of other writers is the best insurance you have for having a successful launch of your book, regardless of how it's published. And then buy books from publishers you support, or, you know, from stores you support. Just put your money where your interests are, and that will come back to you tenfold. And that goes in real life and also on the internet. And Kate, you want to talk about, Kate's our social media guru for our authors. So I'll kind of let her end on the social media question, and then we can go into the question period.
Yeah, social media. It's interesting. I think it's especially helpful for a self-published author. I mentioned author websites. Those are just kind of the best thing you can do. If someone's going to Google you and your name comes up and you have like professional looking website, it's always a good thing to do. At the bottom of that website, you can usually link your social media there. So it's just a good platform for you to be on, whether it's Squarespace or WordPress, or there's a lot of options. You can kind of pick the best one for you. Do I need to be on every social media platform? Yes and no. You should be on the ones that, like, you should be active on the ones that you care about. And if you don't like Twitter, but you're more of an Instagram person, you can jump on Twitter, use your name as your handle, and retweet stuff that people post about your book when they tag you. It's important to be able to be visible and tagged, but if you don't use it a lot, you know, it's not worth your time and the effort to kind of like make yourself do it. If you're more of an Instagram person, you like sharing photos or little videos or whatever, and that's kind of more your bag, that can be where you're at. Facebook is always great, especially if you're active in a local community, which I think tends to be where Facebook leans now. That's true for us anyway. A lot of our Facebook following from Hub City Press, and our writers think about this too, this way. It's just folks that are kind of near us. That's probably because we're a brick and mortar store. So that's helping in that area. But Facebook is great for longer form posts. So if that's your kind of bag, you can do that. The author page versus a personal page is really not something I'm seeing on Facebook anymore. So Facebook is a good way to talk to people you already know about the book, and Twitter and Instagram can be sort of more public facing, less personal areas of social media now. I just don't see a lot of even big authors that I see, their kind of professional pages on Facebook just really don't get the views anymore. So I think that would be something to skip at this point. And a lot of just like the literary industry, especially if you're working in a literary space, are on Twitter. Reviewers, people who cover books, people who make, you know, lists of books, you know, for people to check out on the internet. Like, so many of those people are on Twitter. So even if you don't want to learn how to do it, it can be kind of a fast-paced, rather obnoxious environment on Twitter, I will say. So if that's not you, grabbing your name and throwing your very nice iPhone author headshot, and putting, you know, in your bio, like, author of this book and the pub day and where to buy it. Anything that will, you know, send somebody to click a link and purchase your book is a good place to be. But you don't need to like hit it every day if it's not something that you think that your readers are going to frequent. That's my quick spiel on social media. And if there are other questions later, we can come back to it.
So yes, that is where we're going to move next. Obviously we've been talking mostly about black and white, standard book, which means, color on the outside and black and white on the inside. That's because that's the majority of what we do, but we do publish some 4-color books. We do not publish children's books. But I think we both have, I mean, because we do some color books, we kind of understand it. So we're happy to answer questions about producing children's books. But we don't have very much insight into like being a children's book author, beyond the fact that we've tried to make this these are good tips for no matter what kind of book you're publishing. That's why we want to make it that way. But we do understand that, you know, children's books are different production and everything than adult books. And we'd be happy to touch on that. Most of the places that we mentioned, i.e. Ingram Spark and Amazon, KDP and all those places, they do color children's books as well as black and white. So this should all be totally applicable. It's just that they're going to be more expensive, heavier, you know, all that stuff comes into play. Kate, I'm going to grab the lightning source link because I think that's really important for people to look at. Do you want to start answering questions? I'm just going to dip off for a second and do that.
Sounds good. So I've got, we touched on Library of Congress earlier, and I've got a question in the chat about that I want to cover really quick. We put all of our books into the Library of Congress. It's called Catalog and Publication Data. That is what goes in if you open the back of a copyright on a book, the back of the copyright page will have all of that stuff, all the numbers and letters and stuff. So that is generated by a publisher. When I tell the Library of Congress that we're going to publish this book, I fill out a form and I send them the interior and they take a look at it and then they generate that stuff for me. For self-publishing, usually the better thing is, let me look, I'm going to give me 1 second while I look this up. So you don't have to do this for self-publishing unless you want the Library of Congress to have your information. What you do once they catalog your book by filling in that form, etc., is they record it, you know, catalog it in the Library of Congress, and all you have to do in return is send them a copy. It should be free, and you can kind of make your own little account on this website that I am pulling up right now.
There's a thing called, if you want to grab the PCN, that's the one that would be, so there's a thing called the PCN. Basically, every publisher has an assigned number. So we have a number, and so if you're pumping out a lot of titles and you need a lot of Library of Congress registrations, then you're a publisher and you have a number. But what they've allowed now for because of so much self-publishing is something called I think it's called a PCN or an LCN, which is basically just like you send them the details about your book and they assign you a little number. It's not as long as lengthy as the stuff that we get because you may just be publishing one book, but it still registers it in the system.
Yeah, so for self-publishing, thanks while I looked this up, and thanks for covering for me, Meg, while I did that. So you're going to look for the Library of Congress control number. That's an LCCN. It's a unique identification number that the Library of Congress assigns to the catalog record created for each book. So you don't need all of the extra kind of stuff that big publishers need on the back, but the LCCN is what gives you the catalog number in the Library of Congress. And then you can send your book to them and it'll be available there. So,
and what I will say is that it takes I've found 2 to 3 weeks turnover for them to get you a little number back. And then you put that in your copyright page. Yep. Other questions we have is recommended font style and size. So crazily enough, if you type we think of like Word documents as being very readable, but they're actually like the text is pretty big. So you all are familiar with like Word Times New Roman 12. That is not suitable for a book. Actually, Times New Roman's not used in books really at all professionally because people associate it with Word documents. And so it's not exactly a great, you open up a book, you want it to feel like it's published and not like on your computer. And so, but there are many fonts like you would be familiar with, like Garamond, Gaudi, Caslon. Those are all fonts that live in your computer as well, but we have professional versions of them as book designers. But a book like this, this is Caslon, and this one is probably set at about 10.811. So everybody has different feelings about what size book type should be. This is a tight one because this is a really long book. It's like 380 pages. And so we wanted it to get smaller, not bigger. But this is actually still pretty big text. But normally books run between 10 and 11 and a half point size. If you're up at 12 or 13, you're way too high. That's too big. There are large print books and they're up at 14 or something, but those are specific. So standard book should be between basically 10 and 12. 10
The
and
other
12.
thing you want to consider is leading. Leading is the space in between lines. If you've got a Times New Roman 12-point font, double spaced Word document, that's quite big leading, but a single space document in a Word document is pretty tight. So what a book designer will do is pick a balance between the font size and the leading width. And that will give you kind of the most readable book. This is something that hiring a designer is gonna, you don't have to think about this stuff because they know what's gonna look best. But if you're doing your own interior, you want to think about the height, you know, the size of your, the point size of your font, but also the space in between.
And then we have a question about the editing prices. As I said, I pulled those from the Editorial Freelancers Union. So that's gonna be the highest. But yes, the person has said $2,800 to $4,700 for an editor. This is, they're probably not going to do it per page at a certain point, but I would say if you would like your book to be developmentally edited, which means that they get back to you with like, this beginning is good, the middle part sags, you need to tighten up these pages. I've gone through and like taken out this character and combined it with another character, and you're going to rewrite it as one character. And I suggest combining these two chapters into this one chapter and moving it to the end. Like that's developmental structural editing that will run you probably $1,500 to $2,500 for a full book. If you would like to have your book just copy edited, which is like, hey, I wrote this in my own head, I would like this to be cleaned up and I want typos to be caught, and that is super useful, and you should do that too. Maybe the person reading it's like, hey, I lived in Atlanta in 1984. We didn't have that thing, that wasn't built yet, or something. They catch like little facts that you may have gotten wrong. Or they say you have two characters, one's named Barry and one's named Bori, and it's confusing. Like that kind of like more surface level, but still a super, super important. That stuff, that'll probably run you more in the $500 to $1,000. And that part I would say is the more essential. If you want to work with a developmental editor, I would get in touch with one and see what their rates are. They usually, the longer the book, the lower the per page rate. And they might be able to give you a good deal. But that is a commitment to really making your book better. If you feel like your book is done, that copy editing, surface level editing is probably more necessary. And I would say that that is the part that will really make your book professional, so that people aren't reading it and finding typos and finding mistakes. That's what you don't want.
So there's another question here about pen names. And I tend to think to just kind of do what you want to do. If you've got another writing life that you want to separate from your self-publishing writing life, great reason to have a pen name. If you just want to feel like a different person, if you feel like a different person wrote the book than the person that you are in real life, that's kind of how I feel. Use a pen name. If you would rather avoid the confusion, it doesn't really matter. There's no real, it's just sort of depends on how you want to do it. There's no detriment to using a pen name in self-publishing really at all, because you're controlling kind of everything about it. This is just another thing that you can get, you get to decide to do. So
it's the pen name comes into a little bit of an issue. Pen names are used more in genre. They're used more in fantasy, romance, that kind of stuff. They're used less in literary spheres, though a little bit more. They're often used to disguise gender, which I think we don't need anymore. I think we're past the point where, like, if I get a thriller from, a query about a thriller and it's like AC Henry, I assume that it's probably a woman who wants to kind of, gender neutralize their name, which I understand where the impetus is maybe 10 or 15 years ago, but now I think we're a little bit past it. Unless you just like the way it looks and sounds and you just want to, or you really hate your name and you're like, it's not an authory name, I want to use an initial. Totally your decision. The problem with pen names is that once you do it, it bisects that you're writing. So if you decide to not use a pen name anymore, you can't really connect those two things. So that work is always going to be kind of not aligned. And the other thing is, if you're writing the book because of your professional achievements or relationships, then you can't access those as well, because you've put a pen name between yourself, your identity. So like, you know, we have to trust you when you say that you're a licensed, you know, optometrist for 60 years or whatever, because we can't look it up. So those are the downsides of using a pen name.
Yeah, they're definitely more common in fiction, and that's in nonfiction, you probably want to stray away from them.
Yes,
Definitely.
in nonfiction, definitely. Yeah, that would be, unless there's a reason to anonymize a story or you feel for your safety that there's a concern. Those are the only reasons that you would use a pen name. We have any recommendation for market research to define audience for a book? And that one, I would say that think about the places that you buy books. Think about, you know, go on, this is stuff we do quite often, go on Amazon and see, put in a book that you think your book is similar to and see what books come up in the like, you might also like. And then, or if you know of a book that has been successful, and what I'll sometimes do is go to Google and hit the news tab and put the author and title in, and you'll see every time the book has been mentioned in a newspaper. And that might tell you, especially in small papers and local papers, it might tell you like what the librarians are hosting in terms of book clubs, and maybe you can contact that person and say, I have a similar book and maybe you'd like to include me in your book club. So like Google, just like some light Google stalking of authors with similar books is definitely a good idea. Go, like we said, go into your local bookshop and see what they're doing, what books they're putting up front, how they're talking about them, maybe if they have those little shelf talkers, you know, sometimes I'm surprised if a women's title, women's fiction title, which is just a catch-all name for fiction that's about domestic and sort of geared towards women. Sometimes they'll have a historical bent, and when you look them up, it's like, oh, they've been to historical societies, they have been to, you know, it's like, oh, their book is about, you know, World War II, and they've been to like World War II museums, they've been doing, so that's an author who really understands how to market the book for more than just like your local bookshop. So always be thinking about, no matter how fictional your book is, it's rooted in reality in certain ways. It's about things, and you need to access those things in order to get to the people who will be interested in your book from every single possible angle. So yeah, a lot of Google sleuthing, connecting with other authors, and going into bookshops and libraries, and also good old Amazon just for seeing what is keywords. Amazon runs on keywords in their algorithm. So like, what words are people putting into Amazon, and what's like what comes up when you put your keywords in or whatever.
There's another question in here about occasional sketches in a book, not an illustrated children's book. Great question. If these are black and white sketches, they shouldn't cost any more to print on the inside. The second you add color, even if it's one color, that's going to change the cost of the book to print inside. I love the idea of, you know, doing little sketches and things. I feel like that used to be something you saw a lot more, and I really love that vibe. So that's always a fun thing to do. You can hire illustrators to do that on the places that we've listed. We've done that before at Hub City, just little black and white illustrations at the top of chapters or inside a chapter.
It really makes the book feel very special inside, and it like Kate said, it doesn't add anything in print costs, so why not?
Yep. If you're gonna do color, like that'll take it over.
Photos also don't. If you include black and white photos, especially if you're working on a family history project and you're going to be putting a lot of photos into it. If you, I was going to grab them, but if you are okay with the lower quality, it's not incredibly high quality photo printing, but it's fine, and it's black and white, then you can have photos of your book and they won't cost anything. It's not good for art. It's good for, you know, archival photos, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and the thing you can do, this is like going back to scanning your photos super high resolution. If you have done that, they should come out in black and white just fine, and you can get your designer, or you can Google how to tone them to like be a little less high contrast, and kind of flatten them out a bit so they look good, especially if you're going to pick the cream paper route. If you're going to do lots of photos, like maybe white paper in a nonfiction title is a good way to go. But this is just generally a really good way to spice something up without paying extra for color.
I'm going to share my screen so I can show the Ingram Spark calculator, because I think it ties into a lot of the stuff we're talking about. So here, this is the calculator that I was telling you guys about. This is Ingram Spark. They are, you know, like I said, the printer that even we use for our short runs and for our things like that. You can see they do color books, they do black and white books, they do all sorts of stuff. And they also have they have how to self-publish, how to design, really good resources on here. I would say this is like your first step. But they also, Ingram is the largest book distributor. They distribute to Amazon. So when we talk about wholesalers, where people get their books, Ingram, not Spark, but Ingram, the company, is the biggest distributor and wholesaler in the country. So that's how they've been able, by owning printers and also owning distribution, that's how they've been able to compete with Amazon as becoming this really big self-publishing unit. And I will say that they have much clearer instructions, much clearer templates. They're much friendlier. So like overall, it's a much nicer company to work with. They're in Tennessee too. So not that that's local, but it's a little more local, and you'll get your books faster and stuff because they're right here. But they have really clear, independent bookstores, online stores, chain stores, ebooks. So just like very, very clear. They also will distribute your ebook for you globally. And it's just it's really the best, I think, right now. But they have they have what kind of books they can do: black and white printing, standard color printing, premium color printing. They have the weights. You can see the cream there. Groundwood paper. I have some here. This is like what you get in paperbacks. It's like that kind of recycled paper. It's much lighter. So if your book's really long, you might want to consider that. And then they have different cover options, book textures, and book binding options. So this is very, very worth. Oh, and they just added a bunch of sizes too. So this is very worth like poking around on. But under resources calculators, this is the part that we use the most, is the print and ship calculator. And so this is the information you need to know if you want to use this service, or you're thinking about this, or even if you're just planning. This is a really good way. You pick the size of your book. So here I'm going to go with 5.5 by 8.5 because that's the standard size. And it's a black and white book. We've talked about that. We're just doing black and white. And then cream, again, not more expensive, just nicer. It's a paperback, and perfect bound just means that it has glue binding, not staple binding. That's all that means. And then the cover, laminate type. I wish they were a little clearer about that. Cover or dust jacket, we want it to be matte. Matte is a little bit more modern. Gloss was very big in the 80s and 90s. And then duplex cover, it means, is there stuff printed on the other side? I have never duplexed with this company, so I had no experience, but they do it. And so then you'll see here that your book needs to be a multiple of 2, between 18 and 1,000 pages. So somebody mentioned 280 pages, so we'll just put 280 pages in, and say you want to get 100 because you feel like you're going to be able to sell a bunch of these. And books have gone up a huge amount in the last couple of years, I will warn you. But this is just to give you an idea of what you are looking at. And then you're going to put in your postal code and calculate. And it's going to give you a pretty clear breakdown of what your bill is going to be. Like, this is really impressive. Everything in publishing is so opaque, and this is just like really delightfully simple. If you can ship it to a business like your office, you'll save a ton on shipping. There's just a hack. They don't like shipping to, it's UPS, so they don't like shipping to people's houses. But you can see 100 copies with 280 pages in 5 business days, which is really great. And it's going to be $5. And so you're going to pay, with all the taxes and shipping and handling, $636. If you were to order 10, it goes up to $520. It's not really a big difference. But you know, something to think about. Just then it's going to cost you $70. So maybe you just want to order 10 and just go about it that way. But when you're planning out your book, you might want to think about, if I'm going to order, you know, let's say I'm going to get 250 copies. What do I need to price these at to make a little bit of money? So $5, you can put $15 on them, and you know that every book you sell yourself directly, you're going to make $10 on. So that's a really good way to just get, and I put that in the chat already. That's just a really good way to like get your brain around the idea of what the costs are going to be upfront while you're still in the planning stages.
I'm going to touch really quick on another question I've seen in here. Since we were just talking about groundwood paper and some other stuff. There's someone asking in here recommendations for eco-friendly, more sustainable oriented printers in the US, Canada, etc. I will just say up front that book printing is not super eco-friendly because we're printing on paper. and they have to cut down the trees for it. Groundwood paper is an interesting option because it is it's made from coniferous trees and not like the typical tree that you would use for paper. It's pulped differently. It's like physically smooshed pellets, and it's not chemically treated. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can look up a little bit more about groundwood paper. It's a lot thinner, and it is usually used for books that are thicker. So I don't know what it would behave like in a smaller book, but it is sort of more recycled and a little bit, you can think of it as a little more responsible. The best thing about Ingram Spark is that they are in the United States. They're not shipping, they're not like ferrying books across an ocean and causing all of that kind of stuff. So if you are going to print somewhere in the US, Ingram Spark is a great way to go. Especially if you're concerned about that kind of stuff. They're a great company, and they definitely are thinking about that. And they have you know, eco-friendly shipping options in some places. So that's like really the best place to go, just generally.
And it is just like people used to put in their copyright pages, like printed on this and such level recycled paper. And then everyone stopped because the entire industry, just all the paper now is partially recycled. None of it is just like they're chopping down one tree and making paper out of it. Mainly because that's not like sustainable or really cost effective. So there's always recycling going into paper. But yeah, the point is that it's an inherently not very eco-friendly thing. But something like groundwood is definitely like untreated and a little bit better. You can feel a little better about it. And we're talking about paper also, matte versus uncoated. Uncoated, almost all stocks have some level of coating on them. It's kind of it can get very nitty gritty, but basically something like a groundwood or like a black and white page is going to be essentially uncoated or maybe very lightly coated. What they call it smooth or vellum, which is like, it's just like, so you can rub your finger over and it's like not mumpy or anything. But then when you do, I have a book right here, when you do 4-color printing, I'm not sure this will show up, but yeah, I think it will. You can see that there's quite a heavy matte lamination on there, and this is photo ready paper essentially, so that the colors pop. If we printed it on groundwood, it would be so muted, the colors and everything. So we use these matte coated stocks for color stuff, and they are a lot heavier and a lot more expensive, but they make color work look a lot more beautiful. So, but most books, you're just going to be on standard coating. You won't even really be able to see the coating.
I saw somebody ask about AI art. I think this is a great question about AI art for covers. I have very little experience. I think neither of us have any experience really with AI generated art. Kind of a cool idea. Definitely something to consider if that's going to suit your project. I think there's maybe no reason to do it if it's not going to be part of the book's package in some way. You know, if you're doing sci-fi, that could be kind of fun. If you're doing kind of futurism in any way, that could be really interesting. If you're doing nonfiction about AI, you know, I think that to just have a computer slap a cover on your like tender historical novel is maybe not the right way to go. But if it fits kind of what you're doing, I say like go for it and let me know how it goes. I'm really interested in this kind of thing, but
yeah, be aware of any like copyright stuff that you might be running into. That's still really like a expanding issue is if it's pulling from information on the web, is it you know, violating copyright? I saw one example where somebody had made a D&D book for Dungeons and Dragons, and they were like, wow, I made this AI cover and blah blah blah, and it was actually like really beautiful and looked great. But then people were commenting, this was on Twitter, and saying like actually this is pulling from copywritten art, that it isn't actually creating anything. It's pulling from the vastness of the internet to create images. And it had pulled something that was from D&D copywritten. And so they were like, you might not want to use this because technically if the D&D company that makes that decides to get, or like a Disney company or something like that decides to get litigious, they could probably come after you and say you violated copyright. So that is the only concern. And I don't have an answer because I don't know enough about it, but I know that is a concern. It's like, what if it's a brand new image, but it's based on copyrighted material, is it copywritten? So that is always a concern.
I would say to once you get your image from whatever AI thing generates it, to do a Google image search of the image, because that will pop up anything.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That it's similar to. And then you can also kind of look up some rules, because like we said, we're not sure how that works. It's quite new.
That's a good thing to do with any image. If you find a stock image and you're like, I like this, I wonder if it's been used for a book cover before, just drop it in Google and reverse image search it and see if anything else comes up. We have a question about offset printing. Ingram only prints in the United States. They have printers in Chalmersburg, Pennsylvania, California, somewhere in Bentonville, California, and in Jackson, Tennessee. And those are the only places that they print. So there's entirely US printing. Amazon does a mix of US and foreign. So I'm not 100%, they're not as opaque about, but when you print with Ingram, they do tell you which printer it's coming from. So that's nice.
Trying to make sure that we've covered everything in the chat.
We have questions in here about Hub City versus us. And so basically we both work for Hub City, but we also work as independent contractors and freelancers in our own life. And I dropped our websites in there so that you can see how we structure our websites, which is just good. We're both writers too. So just good to, have examples of writers' websites. So Hub City is open for nonfiction queries right now. So if you have a nonfiction project, you're welcome to submit it. You can go to hubcity.org/submissions, I believe is the page, or just publishing, hubcity.org/publishing. And we take a query letter like you would write for an agent, and then a whole manuscript that we look at. And this is the 1 month in the fall that we look at manuscripts, and we look at them again in April. So if you missed this one, it is day one of it. So you have 30 days. And then we open again in April. So that's you can get a project to us if you think it's a fit. And then, so we don't do any self-publishing or any of that kind of stuff as Hub City. This is just something that we do personally, but also we have access to so many more resources through Hub City. That's why we try to share them, because it's part of Hub City is a mission-oriented organization. As I said, we're a nonprofit. And so it's really important to us to offer transparency and sort of explanation of these publishing systems. And so basically we are offering this kind of boot camp as a way of showing people the publishing systems that they can access themselves without needing a publisher. And we only know about these because we're a publisher. And so we don't do self-publishing. We don't do any sort of evaluation or critique or consultation for self-publishing through Hub City. But both Kate and I do book design and production design stuff for individuals and for other publishers in our private lives as freelancers. So you can look at our websites and see all of that. But if you are a writer who's not interested in self-publishing or is kind of weighing the options and would like to submit to a traditional publisher, we are open for nonfiction right now. Pretty much. And so only nonfiction during October. Yes, we are open for nonfiction. Then we reopen for fiction in March.
Yeah, we basically stagger it. We do fiction first. We do March, April, September, October, fiction, nonfiction every time.
And agents can submit at any time if you have an agent as well.
Yep.
I will drop the links to our websites again.
Oh, they might have just gone to one person.
What's that? Oh, maybe, yeah. Everyone.
There's one more question in here about cover photos and public domain things. Those are generally, you just want to double check on anything that says it's public domain. Library of Congress has a really good, old images, old photos, all that stuff. You just want to double check and make sure that you're not hitting any copyright things that might be latent or hanging around. You can Google image search something to figure that out. I'm not, Meg, are you familiar with Gutenberg.org? I'm not.
Is it like a Foundry or open thing? Yeah, I think it's like open source. I am familiar with it. And I think it's like Library of Congress. I think that it's fairly open. Every place that says that they are an open source photo or information archive like that will have really usually pretty clear guidelines about usage and permissions, and because they have to in order to not be sued themselves. So just poke around on the site and you'll find something about permissions and whether it's under, you know, content what's it called, you know, usage, free usage or whatever. So they'll usually be really clear about that. But yeah, you do want to make sure. And the great thing is if you see something that is from an artist and you really love it, if they have contact information on their website, just email them and see if you can pay them $100 or $200. You're not taking their art away from them. You're just paying for one-time usage of it. That's very important to note. So if you have a friend who has a painting and you just love it, you can email that person and say, I would like your painting on my book cover. Can I take a picture of it on my iPhone, which is high enough res for this? And I'll pay you $150 or whatever, just for granting the fact that that's their material and they deserve to be paid for it. But you're not taking away from their painting. Their painting can still hang, it can still sell. That is their property, but you are just granting one-time usage. And put it in writing, put it in an email and send them $100 or something. And often, especially if you know them, they'll be tickled and be very happy to let you use it. So it's always worth asking. Sometimes that's my point there, is just that sometimes it's actually easier to have a conversation with an artist than try to track down free stuff, because like free is sometimes very difficult to track whether the usage is actually clear. And if you just have a conversation with an artist, like sometimes they're like, yeah, cool. So sometimes that's just easier. Think about who you know.
Yep. For Hub City Press full manuscript submission, how long is appropriate for nonfiction? We have pretty clear, I think, guidelines on our on the submission page. I will drop that in the chat in just a second. But we are basically looking for a full-length manuscript to us is like kind of between like 160 to 350 at the very longest. We don't love like just speaking as Hub City, we don't love long books. Just because I think we think that you can kind of it's just like tough to get through. But for us,
unless you're like David McCullough or something, you know what I mean? Like there are people who earn that length, but you should be able to do it in under 300 to 300 pages.
Yeah. There are going to be some very clear kind of like how to format, what we want the query letter to look like, all of that stuff on the submittable link that I will drop in a second. But yeah, kind of 350 is our max. And it should be longer than, 160, 180.
We don't mind short books
book for us.
And we like novellas. This goes for fiction as well. Short books are fine. You should never write past just because you feel like you're not like at book length. Books can be very short. They can be 50 or 60,000 words, but 50 or 60,000 words translates to 130 to 150 pages. So 90 pages is not a book unless you're writing poems. But I would say aim for that 60,000. 55,000 mark, even 50,000 can be a book. But 100,000 is your top. I mean, when we see 120,000 word manuscript in the query, we are instantaneously less interested because we don't publish fantasy. We don't publish any of that. And those are the books that tend to go really, really long. And we run a bookstore and we know what people's reactions to those size books are when they come up to the counter and they're like, oh, it's a big book, and then you have to price it higher and it's more expensive to produce. And so there's just all those calculations. We think you should be able to accomplish it between 50,000 and 100,000 words.
Yeah.
General guideline. We have a final question about us sending this around. We're going to stop the recording here and it takes a little time to process, but we will send the slideshow. Kate, you'll send the slideshow around immediately, and then we'll follow up with the recording probably on Monday, just so it's processed and everything. And we may have to put that in a Dropbox because it's kind of a large file, but we'll send both to you in the coming days. If you have other questions, feel free to shoot them to our emails. And we hope that this was helpful and enjoyable for you. Good. I hope that you got real concrete information, because it can be very opaque, and it doesn't need to be. But I do suggest you all poke around on Ingram's Park just to get an idea of what it all means and what it means for you. That's the best place to have it all in one place.
Yeah, it's a good place to kind of learn the lingo too, because if you're talking to a designer, you can kind of go through that checklist that Meg went through earlier, which I just think is incredibly helpful. It's really hard to find out this stuff, just
If you
kind of-
hire a designer, they're going to
Yeah.
need to know where you're printing it almost immediately, because you can't lay out the template otherwise. So it's good to start with the printer and then go backwards.
Yep.
Well, thank you both so much. This has been really, really helpful.
Well, thank you guys for coming. And we hope to make this sort of a regular thing, just so we can crash course people. We actually got more signups after we made it digital, so maybe it'll stay digital. I'm not sure. I think digital works really well for this kind of stuff. So if there are other things that you would like these kind of boot camp courses in, let us know. And we're happy to offer future sort of industry courses like this for people.
Can you get Drew and John Lane to do what it was like for them?
What it was like for them. Yeah. Next time they have a book come out, we'll get them together.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hardworking guys, both of them.
Mhm.
All right. I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye,
y'all.
everybody.
We appreciate you being here.